We now have the third of our base coating the skeleton miniature videos. If you want to read more about the 5 techniques that I think that all beginner painters should learn, know, and practice, go to zorgamegeek.com/5. Here's the next video, which is really more of an off-white color. So we got splintered bone. Shake it up a little bit. And we'll just sure. Okay. So one problem with the Bones miniatures is they're made of a plastic similar to PVC pipe, and they can have these weird little warps in them. That's the downside, and one way of correcting them is to dip them into really hot water, tap water, and then correct their shape and then try to dip them into ice water. It works a little bit, but it's still, that memory still comes back. So this is just going to be a miniature that leans. So we're gonna get, so compared to the base coat of white, you're gonna see the least difference here with the splintered bone. My paint, I can tell my paint's a little thin here. But that's okay. So I can come back and add a second layer here. This typically happens when you first change colors. I can tell that it's not wanting to coat real well. So I'm going to mix in some of the original paint. Oops, looks like I got a little bit of a hair. So I'm going to let that paint sort of dry here on that first coat. I'm going to go to a different part of the skeleton, and looks like I have cat hair sticking to my miniature because I have a cat who likes to hang out around this desk and the warm computer that's underneath it. So we're going to go back over here. And another hair. So again, this is the least amount of contrast with the underlying primer. Splintered bone, this is supposed to be fresher, newer bone. Could also be used as a highlight color. But you will see here when we add the shade that it will darken up. I may have put a little too little paint in my palette, but we'll see. I'm going to come back to this original area. It should have dried some by now, because it did the opposite of what shading would do, or a wash would do, which is it settled into the deep areas and made the deep areas nice and bright, but the surface areas that should be coated were darker. And that might be an interesting effect if you were trying to show that this skeleton has an inner brightness to it. It's a good skeleton, but counterproductive if, or not counterproductive, counter theme if it is a not good skeleton, as most skeletons are. All right, I need to put a little bit more paint in my palette. And I'm mixing that moisture up, and now I'm going to pick a spot here. See if I have my paint too thin. Nope, it's flowing nicely, but it's also covering nicely. And since this is the lightest of the shades of white, I definitely don't care if I get it over these straps. And then I want to make sure that I'm getting the underneath side here. Just realized I just had this all the way off camera. Sorry about that, as I am... The downside with doing these videos is the camera's sort of in the way, and so your natural inclination is to pull the miniature closer to you and out from the blockage that is your camera. Keep on bumping this camera real well. This arm. See if I can take some of that out. Not trying to make this seem like a super polished video, not because I don't care about the production quality, but more that I want you to be inspired that you can do this yourself. That you can, this is a hobby that is accessible. This is all, I am self-taught. I am not naturally an artist by trade or training. I've never taken any art classes, color theory, things like that, painting classes. This is just me having some interest in this hobby, watching other people's YouTube videos on painting, and just trying my hand at it. Okay. we are close to done here as I'm inspecting. Like I said, this is one of the harder ones to tell. I think I might have missed the top of this arm. And that shoulder blade. All right, I finished painting the splintered bone. So now we have the yellowed bone. It's dry. We have the graveyard bone, so you can see the difference there in color. Then grab over here, it's still probably a little wet. The splintered bone, as you can see, it's very much an off-white. Making sure I didn't miss anything. Looks pretty good, but that one clearly is going to need the most shading to provide contrast and depth to that figure. So finally, we have the Mudy Brown. Get this nice and shook. A hard time coming out of my bottle. There we go. The tip may be a little dried, so we need to be sure to get some water in there. Mix it up. Clear it off the brush. When I clear it off the brush, I like to roll the brush so that way it actually gets it soaked in all the way around. So we're going to remove the cat hairs. And then I'm going to try to be even more careful about my brush strokes in here. So if I have concerns, but there's a hard line, what I will do is I will take my brush and I will actually push it up to the line, so that way the paint then gets pushed into that edge. I'm gonna need a little bit more paint here. This edge down here. Brush is getting a little dry. And we're getting a little too wet. So we gotta come back over here to that spot. So again, because I just loaded my brush up, I'm gonna start above to get maybe some of that excess paint off. And then we're gonna run down, and then around. Now that pushing technique really only works if you have an appropriate amount of paint on the brush. Too much and it's just going to bulldoze, too little and it's not going to push. It's going to be streaky. So we got the fine tuning pieces there. So now we're just going to do the bulk cover. I think I got my paint here just a touch thin, but we'll see how it looks. Okay, now I'm looking for coverage on the base. So I see that down there on the tip of the bow. I'm gonna come actually get up here off my paper towel. Okay, so pretty good coverage. I'm gonna load up a bit more paint here. Twirl my brush to get it all the way around. We're going to get the arrow shafts. Okay, there we go. We have the 3 browns. This is the Mudy Brown versus the walnut brown. You can see that there is definite color difference there. And then the Bloodstone versus the Mudy Brown. And then the Bloodstone versus the Oak. We're going to do the oiled leather here. We're just going to come through each of these miniatures in turn. Get my brush, a little wet. Load it up a little bit. Because I just loaded it up, I'm going to start out here before coming in and doing these finer details. Wow, that's really flowing. So off camera. That's both good and bad, because it'll flow itself right up to those edges, but if it's too much, then it will overtake them. And then also there are questions of coverage. Okay, almost done here for the quiver. So now we gotta get these straps done. Oops, got some there on that elbow, just rubbed it off. Okay, there's that strap. Now we got this strap back here. Yeah, that overflowed. So I may have to take a dry brush and properly remove that this time. Oops. Off camera. strap around. Then I just want to make sure I'm getting, yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my thick brush here. Before this dries too much, I'm going to try to wick away. And I may just need to paint over that because this is my lightest. So I don't know if I can rescue my splintered bone. Let's see. Nope. All right, so we're gonna have to get some splintered bone back in here. See, it definitely overflowed. But, okay. That strap there across the scapula looks a little wonky, but you know what? I'm gonna leave it. That one's a little hard to paint in. Frankly, the sculpt's a little wonky. We have this quiver. Needs to dry there, it looks a little lumpy. We have this quiver. That quiver looks like it could use a second coat. I think this is the one that had that flowing problems, which means my paint was a little too thin. And once again, I have my paint a little too thin. And I just saw a spot that I did not get. So this is why it's important to review your paint. Yeah, so there's that. Wow, you can really see the difference between those three skeletons and just on the base coating. The real color differentiation between the three different bones, and also the quiver and the bow colors. So if you want to learn more about how to paint miniatures and the 5 techniques that I think all beginning painters should learn, know, and practice, go to zorgamegeek.com/5. That's zorgamegeek.com/5. Please like and subscribe to the videos. That helps the YouTube algorithms. All hail our AI overlords, algorithmic overlords. Until next time, keep painting and keep gaming.